Do you ever feel like you're running a race with no finish line? There's that restless hunger for more, a sudden spark of temper over a small mistake, or that foggy feeling of being disconnected from your own life. We often blame our jobs or our luck, but the Buddha pointed somewhere else deep inside. He spoke of the three fires: greed, aversion, and delusion. They are the invisible architects of our daily stress. But here is the beautiful truth. You don't need to be a saint to start healing. The moment you name them, you disarm them. Just by noticing, there is my anger, you've already walked half the distance to true peace. Let's find that path together. Let's take a deep breath together and look at a quiet voice that lives in almost every heart. It is the voice that whispers, "I'll be happy once I get that promotion," or "I'll be at peace once I buy that house." In the teachings of the Buddha, this is called tanha, the unquenchable thirst. In the West, we often label it as ambition or the drive for success. But at its core, it is the first of the three poisons: greed. Greed is much more subtle than just wanting money or power. It is the fundamental feeling that the present moment, exactly as it is somehow insufficient. It's the restless scrolling through social media, the constant comparison of our lives to a digital illusion, and the urge to fill every silent gap in our day with a purchase or a distraction. We act as if we are drinking salt water to satisfy our thirst. The more we consume, the more dehydrated we feel. We become caught in a cycle of chasing, convinced that the next thing, the next achievement, the next relationship, the next vacation will finally be the one that completes us. The Buddha offered a powerful perspective on this in the Dhammapada. There is no fire like greed. There is no grip like ill will. There is no net like delusion. There is no river like craving. Think about that image. A river. A river never stops flowing. It constantly moves toward an ocean that is never full. When we live dominated by greed, we are living in a state of perceived lack. We convince ourselves that we are not enough unless we have more. This creates a constant vibration of stress in our bodies and a tightening in our souls. We become so focused on the future that we step over the beauty of the present. We miss the warmth of a morning cup of tea because we're worried about a meeting 2 hours away. We miss the sound of a loved one's voice because we're thinking about our next career move. This is why greed is a root of suffering, not because things are inherently bad, but because our attachment to them makes our happiness fragile. When your joy depends on external gain, you are always one step away from misery, because the world is in a constant state of flux. But here is where the path of awakening begins. Our theme tells us, identifying it is half the way to enlightenment. In your daily life, this means the moment you feel that itch to possess something you don't need, or that sharp pang of envy, you don't judge yourself. Instead, you stop, you witness it. You say to yourself, Ah, I see you, greed. You have arrived again. This simple act of naming is like turning on a light in a pitch-black room. When the light is off, the shadow looks like a monster. When the light is on, you see it's just a shadow. By identifying the craving, you create a vital space between who you are and what you want. You realize, I am the observer of this desire, so I am no longer a slave to it. In that small space of awareness, the bottomless cup of your heart starts to feel full. You begin to realize that the more you were desperately seeking isn't found in a shopping mall or a status symbol. It is found in the quiet realization that you are already complete. You have everything you need to be mindful, right here, in this breath. Identifying greed is the first step toward putting down the heavy bags of expectation. It's the moment you stop running the race and realize that you have already arrived. If greed is a bottomless cup that leaves us feeling empty, then the second poison, anger or aversion, is a wildfire. It's that sudden, searing heat that rises in your chest when someone cuts you off in traffic, the sharp sting of a perceived insult, or even that cold, heavy resentment you've carried towards someone for years. But if we look closely, we realize that anger is almost always a violent no to reality. It is our internal resistance to the world not being the way we think it should be. In the teachings of the Buddha, anger is often described as the most destructive of the three poisons. While greed might exhaust you over a lifetime, a single moment of uncontrolled anger can burn down a forest of kindness and merit you've spent years planting. The Buddha taught in the Dhammapada, conquer the angry man by love, conquer the ill-natured man by goodness, conquer the miser by generosity, conquer the liar by truth. But how do we practically do this when the fire is already scorching our skin? The suffering caused by anger doesn't just come from the person who provoked us. It comes from what the Buddha called the second arrow. He explained that if you are struck by an arrow, it hurts. That is the first arrow, the actual event, the rude word, or the unfair loss. But then we shoot a second arrow into ourselves by getting angry, by replaying the scene in our minds, and by wishing for revenge. That second arrow is the one that causes the long-term infection of the soul. We often think our anger is a weapon against our enemies, but it is actually a poison we drink ourselves, secretly hoping the other person will die. Now, let's return to our guiding truth. Identifying it is half the way to enlightenment. When we are in the middle of a temper tantrum, anger feels like our entire identity. We say, I am angry. But when you practice the art of identification, you change the language of your heart. You start to say, anger is present. Can you feel the shift? One is a prison. The other is a point of observation. To identify anger is to become a scientist of your own emotions. You begin to notice the physical cues, the clenching of your jaw, the shallow, rapid breath, the tightness in your stomach. Instead of reacting, instead of sending that biting email or saying that hurtful word, you simply pause. You whisper to yourself, "This is anger. It is a passing cloud. It is not who I am." This recognition is a profound act of self-healing. It is like a mother gently holding a crying child. You don't scream at the child to stop. You acknowledge the distress. When you identify your anger without judging yourself for feeling it, the fire begins to lose its oxygen. You start to see that beneath the anger, there is almost always a hidden wound, a fear of being disrespected, a fear of being powerless, or a deep-seated pain. By identifying this poison, you stop being the fire and start being the one who watches the fire. You move from the chaos of the storm into the calm of the eye. This is the halfway point, because you have broken the automatic chain of reaction. You have reclaimed your power. You no longer have to be a slave to your temper or your grudges. You realize that true peace isn't the absence of difficult people. It is the presence of a mind that knows how to identify the heat and choose to remain cool anyway. We have explored the hunger of greed and the heat of anger, but now we must confront the most elusive of the three poisons: delusion, or spiritual ignorance. If life often feels like a movie you are watching while half asleep, or if you find yourself stuck in the same painful patterns without knowing why, you are experiencing the fog of delusion. It isn't a lack of raw intelligence. It is a lack of clarity. It is the fundamental misunderstanding of how reality actually functions. In the Buddhist tradition, delusion is often compared to a thick gray mist. When you are lost in a mist, everything becomes distorted. You might mistake a harmless rope for a deadly snake and feel paralyzed by fear. Or you might chase a shimmering mirage in the desert, convinced it is life-saving water. Most of us live our lives in a similar state of autopilot. We believe the delusion that if we just find the perfect partner, the perfect job, or the perfect status, we will finally be fixed and happy forever. This is the ultimate illusion. The belief that permanent satisfaction can be found in a world where everything is constantly changing. The Buddha taught that this ignorance is the primary engine of all human suffering. In the law of cause and effect, delusion is the very first link. It is the soil where the seeds of greed and anger take root. Why do we crave more? Because we are deluded into thinking we are incomplete. Why do we explode in anger? Because we are deluded into thinking we can control a world that is inherently unpredictable. We see ourselves as isolated islands, struggling against the tide, forgetting that we are actually part of the entire ocean. In our modern era, this fog is thicker than ever. We are constantly fed the illusion that our value is based on our productivity or our digital image. These delusions keep us in a state of spiritual blindness, disconnected from our true nature. But here is the transformative power of our guiding principle. Identifying it is half the way to enlightenment. How do you identify something as invisible as a fog? You look for the aha moments. Have you ever been absolutely certain you were right during a heated argument, only to realize later that you were completely wrong? That sudden moment of realization that, oh, I see it now, is the light breaking through the mist. To identify delusion is to begin questioning your own assumptions. It is pausing in the middle of a frantic day to ask, is the thing I am chasing right now actually going to bring me peace, or am I just following a hollow habit? When you look at your life with radical honesty, you are practicing vipassana, or clear seeing. You start to recognize that all things are anicca, impermanent. You see that trying to hold on to a single moment is like trying to catch the wind in a net. The moment you name your delusion, when you say, I am caught in the illusion of control, or I am judging this situation through the lens of my past pain, the fog begins to dissipate. You don't have to manually fight the fog. You only need to bring light to it. Identifying delusion means you are finally waking up from the dream. You move from being lived by life to truly living life. This is the halfway point of your awakening. You realize you don't need to change the entire world to find peace. You only need to clean the mirror of your own mind. When the mirror is clear, you see reality as it is, not as your fears want it to be. You find a peace that doesn't depend on luck, because you've recognized the truth that was there all along. You were never truly lost. You were just dreaming. Up to this point, we have examined greed, anger, and delusion as if they were separate fires. But in the actual laboratory of our hearts, they are deeply intertwined, forming a complex web of suffering. Delusion is the dark, fertile soil. Greed and anger are the thorny vines that grow from it, strangling our innate joy. We crave something because we are deluded into thinking it will make us whole. We strike out in anger because we are deluded into thinking we can force the world to obey our will. It is a cycle that has kept humanity in shadows for millennia. The Buddha offered a map out of this tangled forest. Our theme reminds us that identifying these poisons is half the journey to enlightenment. But why only half? Because the first half is about clear seeing, and the second half is about continuous being. Imagine your mind as a garden that has been neglected for years. Identifying the weeds, realizing that your chronic stress is actually hidden greed, or that your constant irritability is actually suppressed. Anger is the moment you stop walking blindly over the thorns. It is the moment you stand perfectly still, look down at your feet, and say, I see exactly what is happening here. This is a massive internal victory. Most people spend their entire lives being pulled by these invisible vines, never once pausing to look at the roots. By naming the poisons, you break their ancient spell. You are no longer a victim of a mysterious fate. You are an empowered witness to a natural process. So, how do we walk the second half of the path? If identifying is the awakening, then the rest of the journey is the embodying. It is the persistent, gentle, daily practice of mindfulness. Once you have identified a moment of greed, The second half of the journey is the conscious choice not to feed it. You don't have to rip the desire out with violence. You simply stop nourishing it with your attention. Once you recognize the rising heat of anger, the second half is the choice to breathe through the fire until it naturally cools. Once you spot the fog of delusion, the second half is the commitment to return to the truth of impermanence over and over again. These poisons cannot survive the steady, compassionate gaze of a mindful heart. They are like shadows that vanish when you hold a steady candle to them. Think about the profound relief of this realization. You don't need to travel to a distant temple or sit on a mountaintop to find liberation. You find it in your living room when you're frustrated with your family and you suddenly realize, there is the fire of anger. You find it at your computer when you're envying a stranger's life and you whisper, there is the hunger of greed. In that tiny second of recognition, the cycle of suffering is broken. You have reclaimed your seat on the throne of your own mind. This is the beauty of the path. It is a journey of radical self-honesty, combined with infinite self-compassion. You don't judge the garden for having weeds. You simply start tending to the soil. You realize that you are not the weeds. You are the gardener. You are the vast open sky that remains untouched by the passing clouds of desire and aversion. As you walk the second half of this journey, remember that every time you choose awareness over reaction, you are untying a knot in your soul. You are clearing the space for wisdom and compassion to flow naturally. Enlightenment isn't a trophy at the end of a long race. It is the quality of the very step you are taking right now. You have already done the hardest part. You have opened your eyes. Now, all you have to do is keep walking, one mindful breath at a time. The journey to freedom is not about becoming someone else. It is about finally meeting who you are beneath the noise. By identifying the roots of your suffering, the cravings, the anger, and the fog of delusion, you have already crossed the most difficult threshold. You have moved from being lost in the storm to being the one who watches the sky. The first half of enlightenment is this simple, brave awareness. The second half is choosing to stay there with a kind and patient heart. Your peace is not a distant destination. It is the quiet space you have just reclaimed within yourself. Keep your light steady.